Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Next Trust Bill Flash webinar titled 5 Things That Your Staff Can Do to Improve Patient Collections. Today's webinar is presented by Stephanie Cremines, CPPM, CPMA, CPC. She's the owner of RCM Insight. Stephanie has served in various roles in the medical billing and coding field, including revenue cycle manager, consultant, auditor, biller, and coder. Stephanie has a passion for educating providers, coders, and billers on how to maximize their revenue through proper documentation and effective workflows. Her consulting experience includes specialties such as family medicine, cardiology, psychiatry, urgent care, GI, pediatrics, OBGYN, and behavioral health. A few items about today's webinar. We'd invite you to enter any questions for Stephanie in the chat, and she'll answer those either during the webinar or at the end during the FAQ time. We'll also email the recording to each of you after the webinar, so you'll be able to review this if you would like to at a later time as well. We'll now turn the time over to Stephanie and thank her for being willing to provide us her expertise in sharing today's webinar. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining today. I'm excited to present today. I'm taking a little bit of a different approach on the presentation here, and I really hope that everyone enjoys it. We know patient collections is a really hot topic. We see lots of resources available on how to improve them and best things to do. And I'm hoping that today you leave with a little bit different information and a different kind of point of view that you'll be able to take back to your practices and find some great use for improving your overall patient collections. Today, we're going to look inside the office at what we can do to improve those collections. And we're gonna look at this on an internal point of view, as well as we will look at the analogy of a train to our office and our patient collections. So the first thing we'll do is start with why. Why is this important, and why do we need to take a different approach? We're going to talk about creating a solid financial plan, the equivalent of your boarding pass. We're going to talk about powering and equipping your staff to be able to do the job. We're going to talk about team collaboration, making sure we're using our conductors, engineers, and loaders to their max capacity. We're going to talk about having some fun, automating some of the process so that you can have some fun and be more efficient. And then we're going to go to my favorite, the dining car. Again, a nice place to add some fun into that process. So we're going to start out a couple of things that I would like to ask. If you would be so willing, I am curious with the people we have on the call today, if you would care to drop in the chat and just let me know. I'm curious what roles the audience are in today. Are you a provider? Are you a practice manager, billing manager, coder, biller? So if you don't mind, just go ahead and pop that into the chat box when you have a second. Now, while we do that, we are going to go ahead and get started with a poll question. So we are going to look at, I'm curious, how effective is your staff at having conversations with patients about collecting payments? And James, I'll let you go ahead and put that question out there. So are they highly effective, moderate, kind of effective, or low, or just not at all? Okay.
Okay, great, Stephanie. We'll give this question a few more moments, and then we'll close the poll and show the results.
Perfect. And while we let everybody finish up with the poll, if you haven't already, feel free to drop into that chat box what type of role you're serving.
Okay, great. I will go ahead and close the poll, and I will share the results on the screen.
Perfect. All right. So I can't see those on my screen, but I can see it over here in the sidebar. So it looks like we have about half of our audience feels that their staff is about moderate with patient collections. So definitely sounds like there's some room for improvement, but glad to see that they are making an effort and getting some of those collections in the door. We have 12% of the attendees that said they're highly effective at having those conversations with patients. 28% said low, and 8% said that it's just not effective at all at this point. So I think that I hope everybody today will enjoy these new tactics and ideas, and especially those of you, the 12% that have highly effective employees having conversations with the patients. I think you're going to get some really valuable tips for maintaining that with your staff towards the end of the webinar here. So I think there's something here for everyone. All right, and I see, I was just taking a quick look. It looks like we have lots of billing managers, some collections and AR. Okay, all right, so we have a pretty good mix here. All right, great. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on then. Our next spot, we're gonna look for our boarding passes. So if we're going to go on a trip and we're going to take a train ride, we need to have a plan, right? We need to know where we're going, when are we going to leave, where are we going to sit, can I find somebody to help me if I have questions, and of course. And you know these things based on your boarding pass. Even if you wait till the last minute and hop on a last minute train, you still need that boarding pass in your hand to be able to move forward. It's going to answer all of that who, what, when, and where question. If there's something you don't understand, you know that you're going to look for an employee to be able to assist you. Likewise, your office needs a boarding pass of sorts. So in this case, we're going to look at patient payments, and your boarding pass would be your patient financial policy. Now, when we look at our patient financial policies and the questions that come up, we tend to look at this from a patient perspective. We know that the policy needs to include when am I supposed to pay, how can I pay, where can I get information about what I need to pay, what happens if I don't pay, who can help me if I need to make payment arrangements and things like that. But today we're going to take a little bit different point of view. We're going to think about our staff members who are issuing and checking those boarding passes. So we've set all this groundwork out for our patients to know what's expected of them, but have we equipped our staff to be able to check that boarding pass and move forward with confidence? Did we tell them that, you know, with the patient, if a patient is pushing back on payment, does your staff member know when did we tell them they have to pay today? What if a patient refuses to pay? Do they know how to handle that? Who internally can set up payment arrangements, or are they able to do that? How do they know if a patient has a balance, or how do they know if a payment arrangement has already been put in place? So it's really important that you have your patient financial policy, that is your boarding pass for your patients, if you will. And then you also need to have an internal policy or procedure for your staff members so that they can enforce those rules with confidence. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is power. With our trains, we know that we've got diesel and steam and electric, all these different options, but the bottom line is they need power to be able to move. And it seems that staff is also going to be powered by different things. Some things that we use for powering our staff or empowering them and making sure they're equipped to do their job are universal to everybody. So for instance, knowledge, knowing what is expected, knowing that they have the backing of a manager or even all the way to the provider level. That's some really important information that they're going to need to have. They also need to be able to have an understanding of what they're being asked to collect. And with this, we tend to ask front desk staff a lot of time to collect patient payments at the front desk. And they do get bombarded with the questions from patients of, why do I owe this? Is your staff able to answer that question? Do they understand where to find the answers to that? Those are going to be really important pieces as well. I have walked into offices before where I've watched front desk staff not be able to explain what a deductible is or why they have a, why they have a deductible or where that's coming from. And it wasn't that poor person's fault. They just didn't know. They didn't understand what the difference was between a copay and a deductible. So it's really important that while we let them know what the expectations are and that we're going to support them, it's really important that we give them the knowledge and the understanding that they need to be able to intelligently answer these types of questions. This is going to be key in making them feel comfortable to having these conversations with your patients. It's also going to build trust from your patient standpoint in that they can get answers to questions without having to call back and things like that. Now, I know sometimes that sometimes the question may require that a biller call back and things like that. So I'm not looking for front desk to be able to be, full-fledged billers, but be able to answer some of those more simple type questions. Also, training them on things like how to ask open-ended questions and result-driven questions, rather than do you want to pay or do you have a copay? Addressing it with, I see you have a copay of $20. Will you be paying with cash, check, or card? Just teaching them these small things that will empower them to be able to ask the questions that they need to ask with confidence. You also want to make sure that they understand how important their part of the overall goal is to the practice. Sometimes it's easy to feel like, if I don't put in this group number, it's no big deal. It's really important they understand that that is a big deal and kind of get that overall picture of how important each piece of their role is. And then also consistency. We want to make sure that if we have two front desk staff and we have one who is consistently asking for payments and following by the policy, doing all the things that we've asked, we need to know that if the patient comes in tomorrow and they go to the other check-in staff member, they're going to get the same answers, as well as if they complain to the doctor that the check-in staff said they had to pay their bill, that the doctor isn't going to tell them no, they didn't, and ask you to give them their money back or put a note on their account that they don't ever have to pay. That is probably the quickest way to shut down the comfort level with having these difficult conversations with patients about balances. All right. So next thing we're going to look at is taking a time out to really encourage team collaboration. So we know that on a train, we have lots of different roles. We have conductors and engineers and loaders, all these different people who are doing different pieces to keep the train moving. And without extensive training and an understanding of each of those pieces, the train wouldn't be able to go. Likewise, in your office, we have lots of different points of view and unique perspectives, and they all do definitely play part into the whole picture. Staff needs to be able to understand what they're collecting, make sure that they're able to clearly articulate what that balance is for. They need to know when it's time to involve a billing department, a manager, or whatnot. But we also need to really take the time to encourage our departments to work together to get the job completed. And this is an area that I feel like in the medical billing field, we really tend to struggle a little bit. The billers tend to be the bad guy because we catch all of the mistakes. And it's not because we're nitpicky, it's because when there's a mistake, it doesn't get paid, and that comes back into our hands. So I understand from a billing standpoint, it gets hard because you ask for, you take that feedback back, and a lot of times it's met with some resistance and people think you're picking on them and things like that. I think that as especially for like the billing managers and things that are on the call, I think this is a really big area that we can work on some improvement of just realizing why people feel like we're the bad guy and being able to kind of work with that a little bit. Having your billers being able to work with your maybe your check-in staff who's collecting payments and really kind of get a grasp of, do they just not understand that this is important, or are they hitting a roadblock? And then likewise, listening to staff from all of those departments when they talk about roadblocks or difficulties and things like that. So I think the billers have to kind of be, quote unquote, the bigger guy in this one, and really initiate that collaborative approach. Also, consider suggestions from team members for updated technology or change in workflows with an open mind. A lot of these may come with a price tag attached. However, if you sit down and really consider the potential return on investment, you may find that what they're asking for would be very beneficial to both the employee and your office. For instance, companies such as BillFlash have statement services available to you. If your front desk is telling you that they have a hard time getting other tasks done, maybe they're in a rush and they keep miskeying ID numbers, and it's because they've got a stack of statements sitting here that they need to fold and send. It's very likely that you have other tasks that you could have those employees working on to get more of a return on your investment. The cost that you're paying that employee to do these tasks may be more than what you would be paying a company to do that as well. Same thing with like credit card processing and things like that. If you're having to key in a number all the time, but they need a swiper so they can swipe the card, that adds up. That time adds up quickly. It cuts down on mistakes and things like that. So really listen to your team when you ask them what kind of roadblocks are they facing. The more that they feel they have the tools they need, the easier they're going to find it to do a good job on collecting those patient payments. I also can like to recommend doing some role playing, and I know this sounds like everybody groans usually when I say that, and I get it, but it works. And it's great if you take the role of the front desk person or whomever it is in your office that's trying to collect those payments, and let them give you all the excuses that they listen to day in and day out, and help them figure out how to answer these. That has been one of the biggest tools that I have seen that is so effective. There are quite a few videos. If you search on YouTube, you can find some videos that go over handling difficult patients on payment collections. But I'm a big proponent of just doing some role playing and let them really dish it out to you to answer that so you can help them figure out how to handle those questions. All right. So the next piece we're going to look at is making sure that we have some fun along the way. So the hard part's done. You've created a foundation with your financial plan. You've trained your staff to follow the policies and equipped them with the tools they need to do their job. And then next thing is we need to think about having some fun. We need to create new habits. So I know we had about half of our attendees who said they think their team is doing an okay, that it's a moderate level of efficiency with these conversations and being able to really get those payments in. So let's think about what would help create what would create a little more interest and maybe have them a little more engaged and involved. So my recommendation is add some fun into the mix. So think about rewarding new habits, make it a game. I'm talking about incentivizing your staff. Now, when we talk about incentivizing staff, I always have two really strong opinions on this one. Usually about half of my people will say, yes, let's set some goals, let's give rewards or bonuses. And the other side says, no, I already pay you to do a job, just do your job. No right or wrong answer here. I am kind of curious what the thoughts are of the people on the call. So if you want to pop into that chat again, I'm just curious how many people are a fan of an incentive program and how many are not. Now, the biggest, I personally am a big fan of incentives. I think it makes it a fun workplace. I think you get not only are you creating better habits and rewarding the behaviors and the activity that you want, it creates a more a fun corporate culture so that your staff enjoy their job. And we all know that it's very transparent to your patients usually, whether they like their job or if they really don't. So I think usually one of the biggest objections that I see to the incentives gets into, I don't want to spend more money. So we're going to move on into our dining cart in our train. And we're going to talk about options and choices. So we know that we give our patients lots of options and choices for making their payments. But again, when we move the point of view back internally, we are going to talk about our staff. So we're gonna talk about, for just a minute, if we're placing our order here in the dining car, how many people think that if you ordered lunch for your staff that you could order one pizza from one place and everybody would be happy? Probably not many. Everybody has their favorite toppings, their favorite pizzeria. Some might have food allergies and need something like gluten-free. Some people might not even like pizza, which I don't understand, but they might not. So when you're in the dining car, they usually offer you some options based on your preferences and what fuels you. So what we need to do is figure out what fuels your team members. And the big thing here with incentives is that the same incentive that works for one office may not work for another. Just like that pizza, everybody has different preferences and things that are going to work for them. And we want to kind of learn to think outside the box on this. So when the big objection comes to incentivizing staff for new habits and behaviors, the big objection typically revolves around money. I pay you to do your job. I don't want to spend any more money. I'm already hurting for cash because you're not collecting the money. And those are all valid. However, your incentives don't always have to be monetary. If you're in a big city, think about offering prime parking spot. Maybe someone could take an extra 30 minutes at lunch. Maybe if you're feeling super generous, they could leave an hour early for the day. If you can't take the hit on employees being gone for an extra hour or half day or 30 minutes or whatever, then think about something as simple as a certificate or bragging rights. Most people like to be competitive and they like to be the one that puts up a little sign that says they collected the biggest percentage of patient payments this month. So consider some other ideas that introduce a little bit of fun, a little bit of competition among the staff. If you want to work on team building and you really need to create a team goal, you can go that route as well. Really work on, as a whole, we need to improve by X percentage, or we need to fill in the blank. And with that, you can do, again, you can do something that costs money. A lot of times, one of the best incentives that I saw for a team that I worked with that everybody just loved was an ice cream bar. They got to have a sundae bar. And that was at lunchtime, and everybody, did their own lunch. So the practice didn't have to incur the cost of lunch for every single person. You could consider, again, maybe an extra 30 minutes at lunch for everybody. Maybe you all go for a group activity, things like that. So sometimes there is money involved. You can think outside the box, though, and figure out some things that will incentivize your staff. There's no one size fits all, and you know your team better than anybody else. So really think about what incentives are going to encourage them to really move forward. All right, so now we're at the crossing. We're at the gate, and it's time to make the decision. Are you taking the track to the left or to the right? So our takeaways from today, you're going to want to assess the situation. Talk to your staff. Find out what they find to be the biggest obstacles and what they think would make it easier. This is going to be key to getting everybody on board. You're going to want to fuel your team. Make sure everyone understands the expectations for their role. Follow through with providing training as needed and back them up when they run into those tough situations. You're going to want to have fun. A fun environment is going to keep your employees engaged. Work together for that common goal, some friendly competition if it's appropriate in your office, and learn and be able to encourage that good behavior. And then you're going to continually monitor the results. Are you getting what you were looking for? Is it working? If it isn't working, maybe we need to go back and tweak the plan a little bit. Maybe it's not working because the staff still doesn't quite have the education or resources available that they need. Is everybody following it, and is everybody being held accountable? So look at those results, monitor for progress, and make sure that it's working. If it's not, then that's okay. We stop at the next station and we start over with our boarding pass. Look at it and make the changes that we need to, whether that be in your patient financial policy or in your internal policies. All right, and as a reminder, you do definitely want to make sure you're going to review that financial policy at least once a year so it stays up to date and includes anything that would be pertinent that has changed over the last year. So if you're accepting credit cards and you weren't before, things like that, you just want to make sure you keep that financial policy up to date. All right. So those are our 5 things to help your staff improve your patient collections. So I will go ahead and open the floor for questions if there are any. My contact information here is on the last slide. If you have any questions afterwards or would like to reach out, please feel free to do so.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So one of the comments that came from Roberta was that she likes the incentives, but she's not sure if the boss does, she says. So
yes.
Is there some advice that you have in selling this up to management and leadership
Sure.
in the practice?
Sure, that's a great question. So when we're trying to sell it upwards, it comes down to, just like with any other business decision, they need to be able to see the return on investment. So for instance, maybe you start with some individual things where you're not having to spend money. So maybe you start with some certificate of achievements and things like that, but really making sure that they understand that there is something for them to gain out of it. If you can start with something non-monetary as your prize, maybe you go to the boss and say, let me just try this. It's not going to cost you anything. And then to be able to go back in 30 days and show an increase in collections, maybe even being able to show that your staff is more confident in what they're doing and things like that. When it comes to working this upwards, it's all about money. They want to know that return they're going to get. If they're going to put money out, they need to know what they're going to get back. So I would recommend starting small with something non-monetary. And then once you have some results to back up what you're doing, then you can get into the good stuff and really, really hopefully get your employees some additional incentives.
Great, thanks. And in comparison, you could the employees could compare this to the alternative, which is not making any money at all, or even sending it to collections, right, where they're paying 40+% fee, and compare that to, well, if it's only costing us a single-digit percent, 3 to 5% in incentives, that comparatively is really preferable.
Yes, that's a great point.
Another question came from Larissa, and she asks, how can we monitor or evaluate to provide rewards and motivations to our employees?
Yeah, so I have a whole nother series that I've done on key performance indicators, and I'm a big proponent of keeping track of your data and making some monthly comparisons. So I think the first thing that I would recommend is that you do a little bit of data digging and figure out what percentage or how much money is walking out your door because it's not being collected at the desk. So let's back that up for a minute with what is your practice's policy. If it's that all copays are to be paid that day, all past due balances, anything like that. And then really look at how much money walks out the door. Usually if you can present that as a dollar amount to staff, to doctors, to administrators, that speaks. Because if you can say, we're not doing very well at collecting at the desk, or you can say, yesterday, $1,200 walked out the door. And that is going to have a way bigger impact and really grab their attention. And that will definitely help solidify the need for change. So if you don't have any measurables yet, I would definitely suggest starting there.
Great, thank you. Nicole had a question. She said, our practice is having a really hard time giving patients good payment estimates since some of the policies are cost sharing, waiving, some are not, and then there are always discrepancies between the benefits and what is actually paid. For them, this is the biggest hurdle that my staff mentions. How do we deal with that since it's out of our hands?
Sure. So a couple of options that you would have there. One is consider something like a flat rate for each type of service. So let's say you charge $100 for a visit, and you're just going to collect even say $25 for that visit at the time of service. Just really working on how you can make this, obviously you don't want to turn the problem into having to do a bunch of refunds either. So I understand completely how frustrating that is for your staff. Couple of other things to consider though, maybe a flat rate at the time of service, and then a clear understanding of when that payment is expected once insurance has adjudicated. The other option consider things, and this is kind of a touchy one, I know, consider things though like maybe a credit card on file so that you can contact the patient as soon as you have that adjudication and run their payment, so that you're not waiting until the next time they come in, or 3 statements later and things like that. And sometimes when you can do a credit card on file, you also, some merchant services will also allow you to do a payment arrangement that would let you automatically charge that, as well as there's also the charge up to. So some of your merchants will allow you to print out a form that you can sign or have your patient sign that says you can bill this card up to X amount of dollars per day. So once you receive that adjudication back, you would be able to run that card for up to that specified dollar amount, and that way you don't have to send out a statement and things like that. So there's lots of different options. You really just have to look at those scenarios, and those are great questions because it is a very different scenario.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any more? I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just looking through the questions as well.
Okay. Yeah, the next one, let's see. Carlton asks, you spoke about the statement aspect of Bill Flash. I'm told that it also has an online payment portal. How can I find out more information on about these 2 services offered by Bill Flash and any other services? Good question, Carlton. We'll have somebody from our customer success team reach out to you to talk about these other payment options, payment plans, auto pay, online payment portals that we have. So we'll let Stephanie focus on some of these other questions. But yes, if you have any questions about Bill Flash services, we'll be happy to reach out to you. So thanks, Carlton. The next question was from Pradeep. Pradeep says, I strongly believe that incentives are very good to improve the performance of collections. However, investors in the company don't want to shell out more money. How do we deal with this situation?
Yeah, so this is again similar to one of the first questions that we looked at. It's all about approaching this from a business mindset. It comes down to whether we like it or not, our practice is a business. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. It is for myself as well. However, this is where we're at, and we do depend on that money from the patients. So it comes down to really making a business case for your investors of how this is going to help. So again, I would go with gathering some data on what your collection rate is at this point, and then consider trying something on a non-monetary reward level, and track that data so that you can walk in with your evidence that this is working. And if it's working without putting money into it, the buy-in should be there for putting some money into that program.
Great.
And reminding them too as well, this can be a one-time. It doesn't have to be an ongoing. It can be used while you establish those good habits and really enforce what you're looking for from your team.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We have one more question. Mm-hmm. If you do have any other questions, feel free to submit those if we have some more time. This question is from Christine. Mm-hmm. Christine says, for an NPV, the cost is approximately $1,000 to $2,000 for allergy testing and serum. I've suggested to the doctors to call their insurance ahead of time to get deductibles, co-insurance, and have the front desk staff collect something at the first visit. And the doctors don't want to. How can Christine talk the doctors into them into collecting it? Christine spends a lot of time collecting $800 to $1,500 balances.
Oh my goodness. Ooh. Yeah. So this is definitely one that needs some work for sure, especially when you have a high dollar product like that. My recommendation would be first start with some brainstorming of what do you think would be the most efficient? Maybe even if we're not collecting that $800 up front for that visit, maybe having in the financial policy a clear outline of the payment expectations. So for instance, all allergy testing will have a $100 deposit at the, or $100 payment at the time of service, and then once insurance is adjudicated, the balance will be due within 3 monthly payments or whatever the case may be. Start with putting that out there clearly outlined in a financial plan. Maybe have them consider if they don't want to collect at the time of service, maybe this would be a good candidate for being able to do a card on file, so that you don't have to hunt them down and call and try to get that payment, but having something signed ahead of time that you can charge up to X amount of dollars, that may save you a lot of time in collecting that. Christine, I would also recommend keeping track of how many attempts does it take you on average to reach a patient to get that payment? How much time are you spending on it? Because again, now you can monetize it. Now you can go and tell them, do you understand that to collect that $800, we're spending $100, where if we took care of this ahead of time, we'd spend 25 or 20. So really just working on those internal policies to come up with what that ideal scenario is. Again, it's all about showing them what the monetary value is of taking those suggestions.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. Great job, and thank you for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thanks to everyone for attending today's webinar with Stephanie, and we hope that you'll be able to incorporate much of Stephanie's tips with your staff on improving patient payments. Again, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording of today's webinar if you'd like to replay this webinar or share it with others in your office. And thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.